I never thought a simple envelope could destroy everything I'd built. Yet there it was on my kitchen counter, the return address making my blood run cold. My grandfather had been dead for 6 months, and I'd almost forgotten about the whispered family curse that followed our surname for generations. Welcome back to Twisted Tales Planet, where family secrets are never truly buried. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Just an ordinary day until I sliced open that cream-colored envelope and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. In accordance with Howard Blackwood's final wishes, it began, and my heart immediately started racing. My grandfather had been the keeper of our family's darkest history, taking most of his secrets to the grave, or so I thought. The letter continued, formal and cold, instructing me to come alone to the family estate that weekend to receive my inheritance. Just me, not my sister, not my cousins, only me. I hadn't set foot in that house since I was 12, when I'd seen something in the basement that my parents insisted was just my imagination. But the nightmares that followed for years afterward felt too real, too vivid to be fabricated by a child's mind. I still remembered the way the floorboards creaked above the basement, how the air down there smelled like copper and earth, and the strange symbols etched into the stone walls that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. Now my grandfather was summoning me back from beyond the grave. My husband David noticed something was wrong immediately. "Sarah, what is it?" he asked, his hand warm on my shoulder. I couldn't find the words at first. How could I explain the Blackwood family history without sounding insane? The stories about my great-great-grandfather's expeditions to places no maps documented, the artifacts he brought back that disappeared after mysterious house fires, the way family members who asked too many questions tended to have terrible accidents. I simply handed him the letter, watching his expression change as he read. "You're not going," he said firmly, but we both knew I had no choice. In my family, ignoring a summons like this brought consequences worse than whatever waited at the estate. The 4-hour drive to the countryside gave me too much time to think, to remember pieces of conversations I'd overheard as a child, strange warnings from my mother who died too young, the looks exchanged between relatives at family gatherings when they thought no one was watching. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as familiar landmarks appeared, signaling I was getting close. The estate sat at the end of a long, winding driveway, partially hidden by ancient oak trees that always seemed to bend inward, as if trying to hide the house from view. As I parked, I noticed something odd. Though it was early autumn and the neighboring properties had trees showing hints of gold and red, the oaks surrounding my grandfather's estate remained a deep, unnatural green, their leaves perfectly still despite the breeze I felt against my skin. The family lawyer, Mr. Hargrove, met me at the door. He looked exactly as I remembered from my grandfather's funeral, thin, pale, with small round glasses that reflected light in a way that often obscured his eyes. "Ms. Blackwood," he greeted me with a nod, no warmth in his voice. "Your grandfather was very specific about this meeting. If you'll follow me." He led me through the foyer, past the grand staircase, and toward my grandfather's study, the one room in the house that had always been strictly off limits to everyone except him. The heavy wooden door swung open silently, revealing walls lined with books, strange artifacts in glass cases, and a massive desk dominating the center of the room. On the desk sat a single item, a small wooden box, intricately carved with those same symbols I remembered from the basement. Mr. Hargrove gestured toward a chair. "Your grandfather recorded a message for you. Once it plays, I am instructed to leave you alone with the box. You will have 1 hour to make your decision." Before I could ask what decision, he pressed a button on an old tape recorder hidden behind some books. My grandfather's voice filled the room, stronger than it had been in his final days, as if he'd recorded this when he was still healthy. "Sarah," he began, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "If you're hearing this, then you've proven yourself worthy of the truth. Our family doesn't just have a history. We have a responsibility. What you saw in the basement all those years ago wasn't your imagination. It was real. And now it's going to be your burden to bear. The truth unfolded in his recorded message, each revelation more horrifying than the last. The Blackwood family hadn't just been wealthy landowners for generations. They had been guardians, keeping something ancient and terrible contained within the property. The symbols, the rituals, the strange deaths, all connected to keeping the barrier between our world and something else intact. And now, with my grandfather gone, the responsibility was passing to me. Open the box, Sarah, my grandfather's voice instructed as the recording ended. But remember, once you make this choice, there's no going back to the life you had before. As Mr. Hargrove silently left the room, I stared at the box, my hands trembling as I reached for it. I had a beautiful life waiting for me. A loving husband, a promising career, friends who knew nothing of my family's dark legacy. I could walk away now, pretend I never heard my grandfather's message, never opened that box. But deep down, I knew the truth. Some inheritances can't be refused, some family traditions can't be broken, and some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. My fingers touched the cool wood of the box, and I knew in that moment that nothing would ever be the same. The box opened with a soft click, revealing a small, ancient-looking key and a folded piece of yellowed parchment. I unfolded the parchment carefully, my heart pounding as I recognized my grandfather's handwriting. It was a map of the estate, but not as I remembered it. Hidden passages, secret rooms, and at the center, a chamber beneath the basement marked with a symbol that made my vision blur when I tried to focus on it. The key was small and made of a metal I couldn't identify. Not silver, not iron. Something else entirely that felt unnaturally cold against my skin. I glanced at my watch. 45 minutes remained of my hour. I could still leave, drop the key and map back in the box, walk out the door and never return. But curiosity, the same curiosity that had led generations of Blackwoods to their doom, burned inside me. I had to know. I had to see for myself what my family had been hiding all these years. With the map in one hand and the key in the other, I made my way out of the study and toward the basement door. The basement stairs creaked under my weight, each step taking me deeper into the suffocating darkness. The air grew colder, heavier, as if resisting my descent. I reached the bottom and pulled out my phone, using its flashlight to illuminate the space. It looked ordinary enough: stone walls, dirt floor, old furniture covered in sheets. But according to the map, there was more. I moved to the far wall, running my fingers along the rough stone until I felt it. A slight depression, almost invisible to the eye. I pressed, and a section of the wall slid open with a grinding sound that sent dust cascading down around me. A narrow passageway appeared, leading further down into darkness. I hesitated, then stepped forward, the passage closing behind me with a finality that made my stomach lurch. The only way was forward now, down a spiral staircase that seemed to go on forever. The air grew thicker, filled with an odd scent, not decay, but something older, earthier. My phone's light began to flicker and dim, as if something was draining its power. I quickened my pace, following the map to where it indicated a chamber should be. And then I saw it, a door, ancient and massive, made of a material that looked like wood but felt like stone when I touched it. Symbols were carved into its surface, the same ones from the box, from the basement walls of my childhood. There was a small keyhole at its center, and with trembling hands, I inserted the key. It turned with surprising ease, and the door swung open. What I saw inside that chamber defied everything I thought I knew about reality. The room was perfectly circular, with a ceiling that seemed to stretch upward into infinity. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it rested what looked like a book, but not like any book I'd ever seen. Its cover seemed to shift and move, as if made of living shadow. Around the pedestal, drawn in what looked horribly like dried blood, was a circle of those same symbols, forming a barrier between the book and the rest of the room. My grandfather's voice seemed to whisper in my ear, though I knew he wasn't there. The Blackwood legacy, it said. The thing our family has guarded for centuries. The thing that guards us in return. I approached the pedestal, careful not to disturb the circle of symbols. The book pulsed, as if alive, as if it sensed my presence. Something about it called to me, urged me to reach out, to touch it, to open it and read the secrets it contained. But then I remembered my mother's warnings, her fearful glances, her insistence that I stay away from the basement. I remembered the unexplained deaths, the accidents, the way members of our family seemed to age overnight after taking on certain responsibilities. I took a step back, then another. The book's pulsing intensified, and I could have sworn I heard it whisper my name. No, I said aloud, my voice echoing in the chamber. I won't do this. I won't continue this legacy. I turned to leave, but the door had vanished, leaving only solid wall. Panic rose in my throat as I spun around, looking for another exit. There was none, just me, the book, and the knowledge that I had walked willingly into my family's curse. My phone died completely, plunging me into darkness except for a faint glow emanating from the book. It was calling to me, and I realized with horror that this was the choice my grandfather had spoken of. Accept the legacy, or remain trapped here forever. Time seemed to stretch in that darkness, minutes or hours passing as I stood frozen in indecision. Then, from somewhere deep in my memories, I recalled something my mother had told me just before she died. The curse only has power if you believe in it, Sarah, she had whispered. Remember that. It's fear that feeds it, not duty. I took a deep breath and faced the book. I am Sarah Blackwood, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. And I reject this inheritance. I reject this responsibility. I reject this curse. The book's pulsing grew frantic, the shadows around it writhing as if in pain or anger. My life is my own, I continued, and I choose freedom. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the symbols on the floor began to glow, not with the sickly light of the book, but with a clean, bright radiance. The circle wasn't to keep the book in, I realized suddenly. It was to keep something else out. The barrier between worlds that my grandfather had spoken of wasn't physical. It was made of will, of choice, of the conscious decision to stand guard. And I had just refused to take my place. The ground beneath me began to tremble. Cracks appeared in the walls, in the floor, spreading outward from the pedestal. The book's pulsing turned to a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. I pressed my hands against my ears and closed my eyes, certain that I was about to die, that my rebellion had doomed not just me but perhaps the entire world. Then, silence. Complete and absolute. I opened my eyes to find myself standing in my grandfather's study, the wooden box closed on the desk before me. Mr. Hargrove stood in the doorway, his face impassive. Have you made your decision, Ms. Blackwood? He asked, as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't just been in a chamber beneath the earth facing an impossible choice. I have, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my limbs. I'm declining the inheritance. All of it. The estate. The legacy. Everything. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or disappointment. Or maybe relief. Very well, he said after a moment. In that case, there are other arrangements to be made. Your cousin Michael will be contacted next. As I drove away from the estate, I watched in the rearview mirror as the ancient oaks seemed to bend and sway, no longer still and unnatural. For the first time in generations, a Blackwood had refused the call. I had broken the chain, stepped away from the legacy, and as the estate disappeared behind me, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if a shadow I hadn't even known was there had finally lifted. But that night, as I lay beside my sleeping husband, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over, that by refusing the inheritance, I had set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. I thought of my cousin Michael, who would receive the same letter, the same summons. Would he make the same choice? Or would he accept the burden, continue the tradition, keep whatever was in that book safely contained? In the darkness of our bedroom, I could have sworn I heard the rustling of pages turning, the whisper of my name. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that some inheritances can't be refused. Some legacies find a way to claim you, whether you want them or not. Some family traditions never truly end. 3 days later, the letter arrived. Different envelope, different handwriting, but I knew what it was before I even opened it. In accordance with Howard Blackwood's final wishes, it began. The same words, the same summons. As if my refusal had never happened. As if the choice I had made didn't matter at all. I stared at the letter, my hands shaking, and realized the truth my grandfather had been trying to tell me. There was no escaping the Blackwood legacy. There was no walking away. The only true choice was in how I faced it, in fear or in strength. With trembling fingers, I reached for my phone and called my cousin Michael. "Don't go to the estate," I said when he answered. "Whatever you do, don't open that box." But it was too late. He had already received his inheritance. He had already made his choice. And now, the consequences were coming for all of us. If this story sent chills down your spine, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Twisted Tales Planet for more tales that haunt your dreams. Leave a comment below sharing what you think was in Sarah's mysterious box. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our weekly uploads. Until next time, remember that some family secrets are buried for a reason. And sometimes, they don't stay buried at all.